Welcome back to Creative Therapy Umbrella. This is a place where we talk about all different types of creative arts therapies, expressive therapies, and creative approaches to therapy. My name is Kate Shannon. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor as well as a board-certified music therapist, and I am your host. Today's episode definitely talks about creative approaches to therapy, in that we are going to talk about animal-assisted therapy and equine therapy and how this can support our clients. Today's episode is very, very special, and I also would like to mention that there is a trigger warning for this episode in that we do talk about sexual abuse, and so for any listeners where that might be too hard, this might be a time to put this one down and listen at a different time, or if you've had a rough day. This one might be a little bit harder, but it is a really important and a really beautiful episode as well. Today's episode is Courtenay Baber comes on and she talks with us about not only what she does as an outpatient therapist and the services she provides and the different animal-assisted therapies that she uses, but she shares with us this beautiful story about her mom and the struggles that her mom went through with sexual abuse. And actually, one of the really cool things is that her mom wrote a book and it was unable to be published before her mom passed. And Courtney took on the finalizing of the book and co-authoring and finishing the book. And the book is called Recollections, A Journey of Courage and Abuse. And it's written by both Carolyn and Courtenay Baber. And it's just an amazing story of growth and hope. And as hard as it is to talk about this topic, it's a really important topic that needs to be talked about. And many therapists, I'm sure, have worked with children who are survivors of sexual abuse. And this episode really has some beautiful, beautiful takeaways for what we can do as therapists and the approach of animal-assisted therapy and equine therapy and how powerful that can be. So Courtenay Baber is an outpatient therapist, and she provides services for adults focusing on anxiety and depression and assisting survivors of sexual trauma. She also manages the Gray Horse Farm, which offers clinics hosted by top recognized trainers as well as shows. She provides equine-assisted therapy at the farm through Gray Horse Counseling, and the aim is to help the world to see the power of healing from animal-assisted activities and therapy. And so as we dive into this episode, it's really, really beautiful to hear how powerful our relationships with animals can be and how that can be used for healing. I've been lucky enough to see some animal-assisted therapy and be a part of some animal-assisted therapy, and it's really, really amazing. So we start off talking with that, and then we dive into a little bit more about the book and sexual abuse. And there were a couple things too that I think I wanted to make sure and to include in here. And these are some quotes from Courtney and from the book, but 1 in 3 women have had some sort of sexual trauma. And Courtney talks about how she's focusing more and more on trauma-informed care and working with those populations. And she's seen how helpful horses can be. And she combines the experiential and the cognitive parts of therapy while working with horses and helping people in working with the horse. And she talks about how the experiential modalities allow people to experience and feel. There is a lot to be said about muscle memory and what you feel and what you can do again. So she gives this really great example that I wanted to share as well, that we didn't get on it into the episode, but I want to make sure to share it up front because it's so powerful to think of how animals in general can assist us. And the example says, if, for example, your heart rate is way up and a dog comes into the room with a lower heart rate, when you pet him, your heart rate starts to mirror the dog's heart rate. That lowers anxiety, lowers stress. Sometimes people won't talk to a therapist, but they will talk to a dog or a horse. Horses are sensitive to our emotions. They can really pick up on how we are doing, and they can help us in that way. The horse can also represent things or people, and role play or metaphors can help us get a lot further more quickly. So, I wanted to just kind of tease the episode with some of those quotes that Courtney had shared within her book, and she talks more about those in detail in the episode. So, without further ado, let's dive into this episode, and I will talk with you on the other side. All right, Courtney, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to talk more about animal assisted therapy, to hear about what you do and all of the cool stuff that we're going to dive into today. So, again, thank you for being here. And I wonder, just to start us off a little, if you could tell our listeners a little bit about who you are as a person and as a clinician.
Oh, well, thank you.
Uh,
I have a private practice in Virginia, and I do equine assisted therapy, and also do in person talk therapy as well. And I did spent been doing that for about 2 years. And then prior to that, I spent a while, too long maybe, but a while in working in the prison systems in Virginia as well. So did some animal assisted activities and therapies there as well. So got started doing it there, which is kind of fun. So um,
Yeah. How did that start of getting into animal assisted therapy back then in the prisons? Did you kind of like did you know about it or heard about it and then got into it?
so I'd, a friend of mine had actually had a therapy dog in
Mhm.
one of the prisons, and I was like, "That's the coolest thing I had ever heard." And
Yes.
um, was wanted to do that as well, and so I connected with her and
Mhm.
got started trying to work with her on and help her with her program, and was
Cool.
able to bring the dog program to one of the prisons that I was working with, and got that started in one of the prisons, and had just an amazing therapy dog, a little beagle dog named Banjo, um, and he
Such
was
a cute name.
adorable. Yeah, he was
I
just an
love it.
adorable, yeah, an
Yeah.
adorable dog.
Mhm.
So, and in brought him into the prison system, and he was,
Mhm.
probably one of the better therapeutic moments that I had, with with him, and just one of those great moments that you get to do.
Yeah.
Was There was an inmate that was there that had been, you know, in prison for a really long time,
Mhm.
and in prison, one of the things that there are lots of things you don't think about that happens to inmates. But anyway, one of them is that they don't have a lot of, or at least then, this was several years ago, they don't have a lot of interaction. They didn't have a lot of contact with people,
Mhm.
or they're not supposed to. Anyway,
Mhm.
so he came to me when I brought the dog in, and he said, do we get to touch the dog, or do we get to spend time with the dog? And I said yes.
Mhm.
And so he said, um, can I send you a request? And I said yes, you can. And so he sent me a request, and um, I brought him down to the office, and so
Mhm.
he's sitting there, and this man is sitting there, and Banjo jumps up on the sofa, and he the man reaches out to pet him, and Banjo rolls over on his back to he's like, is he man asks, is he okay? And I'm like, yeah, he's fine. he's, so he reaches out very delicately to pet him, and he's trying very hard to be very gentle with him, and he
Mhm.
starts to cry, and Banjo is just like loving it, and
Happy as a
he
clam.
happy as a clam, and he's And he tells me, he's like, that's the first living thing that he's touched in 10 years. And,
Mhm.
he spends a few minutes with him, petting him, and he's says thank you profusely. And it's just one of those moments where I was just like, that was so cool. This is the greatest thing in the whole world. I want to do this forever.
I'm
I
sold.
love it. Sold. Done. Can I
Mhm.
do this
Sign
again?
me up.
Sign me up. Um,
Oh,
and
wow.
and it was great because I had staff that would, that it was great for the staff. It was great for, it really was just, it was a great program. It was awesome. Um,
Yeah. Yes.
so I had another dog in another institution,
Mhm.
that um, help we went out to the mental health units and or to the mental health unit and was so this there
Mhm.
was another guy that didn't talk to people, didn't interact, didn't come out of his room, and
Yeah.
um, this dog came out of his or this dog went on the unit with him, and that this
Mhm.
guy was on, and the guy came out and started petting on him and talking to him and rubbing on him
Mhm.
and by his interactions with him he was able this guy started interacting with people and was able to make a lot of progress, which was again just super cool, and so just it just amazed me, just and he was just such an awesome dog. Both of them were. They were. Um, they just and they didn't do anything really. I mean, they did.
Mhm.
They were just themselves,
They
and which
being
was,
authentically them. Mhm.
which is what we as therapists sort of strive to do. But but it was just so awesome. And I would have people, ask and, but he was, and that dog, the second dog, actually got me through a lot. The year that my mother, the year that my mother died, so he was diagnosed with can bone cancer the
Mm.
year my mother died. So like my mother died in August,
Mhm.
and then as a matter of fact, 2 weeks after um, my mother died, I took him to the vet, and the vet was like, "Yeah, he's got cancer, and
Mm.
we'll have to take his leg." So he was three-legged.
Mhm.
He was a
Mhm.
three-legged basset hound,
Mhm.
and I told the vet, I said, "I will not lose another thing this year." I said, "I don't care what you have to do, but you will.
Mhm.
He will live
Yeah.
this year."
Mhm.
So I'm not. I don't care if I have to put him on a respirator. He will live all
Mhm.
year.
Yeah.
So he did. So he lived until 2 weeks after my father died in 2017.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So it's like
Um,
one thing after another.
it was really, it was amazing to me,
Mm.
that he stayed with me that whole time. So not only did he
Mhm.
help all those people but he carried me through. I mean, he really was just an amazing animal. And I
Yes.
was so grateful, because I kept thinking, okay, well, this is, you know, he's not, he's, this is, and he didn't. And he just kept
Mhm.
going. And then after my father died, um, he really did. He just, I
Mhm.
guess he knew. I don't know. It was really interesting. But he was such a great. They really do such amazing things for us.
They do
Um,
the companionship of, that they know of there's something, they do. I think there's something that they know of, even if we're upset and they come over and they lay on us, or, knowing we need them. And it's really amazing.
It is. And I tell clients sometimes, I'm like, just be the dog.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we are just there. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to say anything. We just have to be. We just have
Mm-hmm.
to be, you
Yes.
know, because our dogs will just come and sit with us. They don't have any expectations. They don't have any wants from us, but they will just
Yeah.
sit, and they don't demand anything from us. And
Mm-mm.
sometimes that's what we really need from people, or
Mm-hmm.
from a really good friend. And I think that's what we get. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I tell people that sometimes, and they'll look at
Mm-hmm.
me, and then I'm like, but that's what that means. And they're like, oh. So
Yes. It
um,
is just it is just being, remembering to be and to be in the present.
in the present, yes, which
Yes.
is can be so hard sometimes.
So much. So,
So
yeah, especially wrapped up in grief or, anxiety or, like you were saying before, in prisons, of there's wherever you are, wherever our clients are, it's so hard to always be mindful. But what a beautiful reminder, especially if you have a dog right there, of like, we can just be the
right,
dog and be
just
in their space.
just be the dog, just be in their space. Yes,
Yes.
and horses are good at that too. They can
Yeah.
do that. All of them, cats, and they can
Mhm.
all just. Cats are a little trickier sometimes, but we
They
can
are.
all learn.
You're snarky.
They're- they can, but they all are right there, and
Mhm.
they don't have that sense of futureness and worry, that they don't get caught up in that let's go
Mhm.
forward, or what if. So that,
Yes.
because at least we can't tell that they get caught up in that what if, because
Right.
I've figured out how to read their minds, but
Not yet.
not yet, which is a
So
good thing. So
it is. What does that difference look like? Of, you gave us some examples with having dogs in pet assisted therapy in that way. What does that look like with a horse in equine therapy?
horses are a little different in that, I mean, they're much larger.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are the minis. I use minis a lot, um, but they are so they just have a different relationship with
Mm-hmm.
us, particularly when we do therapy or activities with them. You really kind of have to think about how you're going to do problem solving with them, because you don't communicate with them, and they're bigger than you are. They're faster than you are. They're stronger than you are. And in some ways, you could almost say they're smarter than you are. So you really have to figure out how to approach that. And I had a client who came out to do some therapy, um, because she would get stuck so frequently, and she really she wanted them to she wanted the horses to go to play with her, and it was really interesting to watch her try to do that, and because they bring up things in you that you didn't realize, whereas dogs and things maybe cal- let you calm down. if that makes
Yeah,
sense. So,
definitely.
like, because you have to figure out some
Mhm.
things about yourself in order to
Make it work.
make it work.
Yeah.
I don't know
That
if I hope I'm saying that correct, but
that makes total sense. And from what I feel like even the example of the two that you said of like imagining that man on the sofa petting the dog is so much more of kind of like calming or, knowing something that you've already known and the dog is just there versus when you're approaching a horse that you might get stuck and not even know that you would have gotten stuck there or that that was something there. And it kind of brings that thing up that you have to work through.
right. And it
Yeah.
often, I mean, and it can also be very calming because you can be very, you can go out and just be with them and be very still and very quiet. But it also can be, because you don't always have control, it can be,
Mm-hmm.
it's much easier to control a dog than it
Yes.
is to control a horse. So, I mean, and even a miniature horse, you're still looking at something that's different or large. So, um, my experience has been that that's been, but it's fascinating and it's wonderful, and you grow a great deal. Um, and one of the things is, you do grow a great deal from, um, you know, from experiencing something. Instead of when you're in the office and you're just talking about something, it's up here and in your head, and then um, when you just you're talking and it's sort of just in your head. Whereas when you actually do something, it becomes more real,
Yes.
and so ex- so your experiential stuff actually gets you to move and to do something, and so it becomes more powerful. And I really find that that is way more effective at getting somebody to do something, particularly when they're stuck and they don't want to do, or they are having a really hard time doing something. And so when people are really stuck, um, I think any kind of any kind of experiential, animal or EMDR or yoga or any of the many experiential ones that are out there, are wonderful, just because it gets us out of our head, which we spend way too much time
So much time up there.
in. Way
Yes.
too much time up there.
Yes. And the action, I feel like I could see so many even just thinking of different clients and people who are so action oriented, finding that experiential piece so motivating and healing and movement, you're moving through it.
Yes, and
Yeah.
and with equine assisted therapy or activities, you want to, or learning, you want to move, and so the idea is to try and do activities with the horses, and so you want to try and create something or move something or build something, and then have the
Mhm.
horse move, do interact with that in some fashion, and that
Yeah.
provides some sort of movement, or just depends on how you want to set it up, but it really does, it's really, it's incredibly fun as a therapist because you're not in the office, and that's so awesome.
Yes. Getting out, being outside, being with the animals. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's just awesome. And then
Yeah.
being, and for the clients too, I think being
Mhm.
outside, after, particularly after the pandemic, or
Yeah. Hmm.
not having to spend time, and just being able to interact with something else, I think is, you know something that's that is not going that's going to react to your nonverbal, so you don't have to talk, So if you've got somebody that's really quiet, somebody that's not doing, that doesn't want to talk, or somebody that is thinks that they're not this, or there are all kinds of things that you can do, all kinds of wonderful things. And someone that's shy, or someone that's, in anything, that it's really adaptive. And that's the other thing that's really cool. You can just do it, it really can adapt to whatever your situation you want it to. Um, so
Yes, yes, which is
it's
so
really,
powerful when we have a medium, a an experience like that that can be adaptable to, whatever it is we need it to be. And actually, this is interesting in how it ties into your because there's a book, which we'll want to talk about the book too, but there's also this whole thread that kind of comes through with your mom, and then the animal assisted therapy, equine therapy, as well as a book too, this book also. Can you tell us a little bit about that connection, maybe with the animal assisted therapy and your mom, and what that kind of looked like?
my mom and I were very close.
Mhm.
And so I grew up um, on a farm, and she grew up on a farm. And so the the book is her story of her abuse, and her how she survived
Mhm.
her abuse. And she got treatment for her depression as an adult. And the book is 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 her story of her treatment and of her abuse. It's kind of both. She was abused by her father, and it was, you know, um, and so that's. But she had horses, and as a kid, She found early on that the horses were a really safe place for her, and they gave her hope, and they gave her comfort, and they gave her basically strength and peace to carry to move forward. Um,
Yes.
and so she was able to really survive because of the horses. And so as she grew up and as she got older and became an adult, she kept the horses with her as a way of surviving. Um, and when she actually finally got treatment and really decided that she was going to get treatment, um, and she went into the, she, we finally, she went into a psychiatric hospital and spent some time there, and then came out and basically spent the rest of her life seeing a psychiatrist, and doing getting treatment. Um, that the horses were her. I'm not sure what she would, but they really provided her with that, I think, grounding for it. And she was always, they gave her a really safe place to be. Um, and so when she was writing this book, she would call me, and for me, I came when I was, I don't know, I loved horses from the time, basically the time I was born. I think I came out loving horses, loving animals, and loving horses. And you know, um, I would, my mother would say that I, would go to the, when I was really small, we didn't have a real barn or anything. We just kind of had a shed, and so I would crawl down to this shed and mom couldn't find me. And so she was looking around for me out in the yard, and she couldn't find me. So crawled down, looked in the shed where the pony was. And here I am in the stall holding the halter of the pony and looking up at the pony and just sitting there. And so mom got me out of the stall, and, you know, she said I kicked and screamed and like bit her and stuff. And then, so she took me and put me down, and I like scurried off back to the barn. And so
Yeah.
I've kind of been in the barn ever since.
Yeah.
So she just kind of left me there. Um, but when I was in fifth grade, I did this report about mental health for my social studies teacher. And I became totally fascinated with mental health and was like, why, like read all this stuff about Dorothea Dix and, the insane asylums and, all this stuff. And it was just like, oh my God, they're treating people so badly. And I couldn't understand why. So I wanted to know, I couldn't understand how, like I had two passions, horses and psychology, and wanted to find a way to combine the two. And that was really what I wanted to do. And I was like, there's got to be a way. And so when my mother, I kept saying, there's got to be a way to combine these two. There has to be equine, there's got to be, somebody's got to do this. And originally, it wasn't. And then after my mother died, um, I started really looking, and I did at that point there were more equine assisted programs, and now there's lots of programs out there for equine assisted therapy and things. And
Yes.
but that was kind of how I got, I always wanted to combine the two, the horses and the therapy. And then mom's mom's book is really, it it it's not an easy read because it's not a happy subject.
Yeah.
It doesn't talk about it does. The good thing about mom's book is that it does give a lot of hope. um, Mom did get better. She got a lot better. She did finally recognize that you don't have to know the answers to why things happen, um, in order to get better, in order to move forward, in order to be able to feel good about yourself. And you can accept things and move forward. And I think that comes through in the book, and I think that's awesome. Um,
Yes.
so, and she does, she did, I think that's really incredible. And I think her story is, you know, it is a story of hope. She does, and she wanted so much for the book to be published. And, it took a long time for that to happen. She died in 2009, and it just got published. So it did take a bit of time. But it was, you know, lots of things have to happen for that. And I think also, I think there needed to be an audience. I think people were not, and maybe we're, I, I hope we're ready to talk about sexual abuse and, child abuse. I think we still just don't like to talk about it. We don't want to it's hard. It's just a hard subject. We don't, you know, it's, it's ugly. And it doesn't, um, people, it doesn't have any boundaries. It doesn't, it doesn't, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care. You know, it happens to, it happens to anybody, to any class, any any ethnicity, anybody, you know. And I think that's what in it. And then we just don't want to think, oh well, it didn't happen. You know, we always want to say, well, they didn't mean it, and that doesn't cut it anymore. Um, but the good part is that, like mom, I think eventually with treatment, like mom, you know, you don't have to understand it to be able to move on. And the horses were able to give her that comfort and treatment, you know, mental health treatment. We can do so much for people now, and that's what I want people to be able to know is that there is help. Um, there's help and there's hope. Um, and you know, it was, mom had some really bad days, um, but she lived through them, and we can live through them. You know, so
That even if we don't know the why, there's still, we can find a way to move through, even like the horses, of finding a way to make the thing happen that we want to happen, the hope, to move towards the hope.
yes, exactly. And that's, you know, it's a really, you know, again, it's not like a light read. It's not something you want to just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, let's read, you know.
Yeah. But an
We,
important read too, at the same time, an important read.
yeah, I think it is an important read. I think,
Yeah.
and I would love to. I want to at some point do like a workbook for it or something, so that people would have
Yes.
um, a way to work through it. But I
Yeah. Yeah.
stage two.
Stage two. Yes, part two. So your mom had written this book, and then this extra time you had kind of, were you putting it together and kind of organizing it and putting the final touches in on the book? Is that what that looked like?
Yes. So I had
Mm-hmm.
done some editing or tried to do some editing. And I'm not the best editor. But really, what happened was that I had read, you know, when mom was alive, mom would call me and say, come read this. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would read and she would say, what do you think? And I would say, this, you know, let's change this or let's do this. And then she would do this. And then she'd call me and she'd say, come read this. And I
Mm-hmm.
would say, this is great or this is no. And she would call me back, come read this. And I was like, come read this. And then she would say, come read this. And I was like, didn't I just read this? Come
Mm-hmm.
read this again. I'm going to read this to you. And she would call me up and she would be like, I'm going to read this to you. And I would be like, okay. You know, at like 6 o'clock in the morning or five
Oh my
o'clock in the morning,
gosh.
because she would call me and be like, I'm reading this to you. And I was like,
Let me
can
get
I
a
get a
cup of
cup of,
coffee.
yeah, can I get a cup of coffee, please?
Yes.
You know, and I'm like, all right. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would have to be like, all right, now what did it say before? You know,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
and I'd be like, okay, this is good. This is, yes, that's much better. Do the, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but it was, so that was, you know, we worked on this book a lot. And she
Yeah.
worked on it until she died in August. And then
Mm-hmm.
we worked on it, I guess, really until April of that year, or May, April or
Mm-hmm.
May of that year of that
Yeah.
she died. So, and then it just, you know, grief took over and
Mm-hmm.
I, it sat and then I knew it. I had her computer, and I was like, I'm keeping her computer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have, I have her book, and she had written she had written a children's book,
Mm-hmm.
a read to book, as well that had been published years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then she also has a preteen book that had been published before.
Yeah.
Um, and so um, I had those, and so I've got got those out, and
Mm-hmm.
um, but I was like, and so then I guess last year, at some point, I was, you know, I just said, you know what, this has got to go out. This is
Mm-hmm.
just, it is time. Um, you know,
Yeah.
there is an audience out there for it. The Me Too movement, it sort of had,
Yeah.
I had actually really, I think when the Me Too movement really was big, I
Mm-hmm.
think that was when my father died. And so then I dealt with that. And
Yeah.
so that got it pushed back, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
took that part of it. And,
Mm-hmm.
and so then I guess the dust settled. So,
Yeah.
um, but that's kind of where that, where that
Yeah.
is and kind of how it, you know,
Moved through time in that
moved
way.
through, yeah, I guess moved through time. So
Yeah.
it was,
It sounds like it must feel so good for you too to after working so hard with your mom, helping her and, being her, person to call at 6 a.m. that now it's like, okay, we did it. Like it's out, stamped, done.
yes, it is. It does feel really good to have it done and be
Yes.
finished and, you know,
And out at a time too, like you said, I think with such an important, heavy but important topic, we've gone through the Me Too movement. There's more awareness, there is more talking. I don't think enough yet, but this time, coming out now is um yeah.
yes. And I, so I'm hoping that, or would like, I'm glad that there's an audience and that there's talking about it. And so,
Mm-hmm.
as long as, I think before people, it may not have been received as
Mm-hmm.
well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but now I think people at least can hear it and hopefully keep a conversation going about it. I don't, that's, that's all. It's just, I just
Mm-hmm.
want, I just hope, if it helps one or two people, it'd be great. And that's,
Yes.
or just let somebody know that they're not, they don't have to, they don't have to be alone and they don't have to keep it a secret. And there is hope,
Mm-hmm.
or just
Yes.
that there is hope, and that they can talk to somebody. And
Yeah.
that's, what I
Mm-hmm.
would like for people to realize
Yeah,
the
it'd be a
most.
beautiful legacy of,
Hmm.
continuing that. It doesn't have to be a secret. You're not alone. You can reach out somewhere. There's hope out there for sure.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And that, hopefully somebody, there's being able to find some sense of safety. I think that's really
Hmm.
important. I mean, that
Yeah.
finding, any, you know, for my mother, it happened to be the horses, but if there's any sense of safety, just being able, there's that great saying, any port in a storm, but just whatever sense of safety there is to,
Hmm.
to have that. And I think that's what's important, you know.
Yes. I love that
Um,
saying, any port in a storm. That's such a beautiful, beautiful way to encompass that of wherever that safety is, like it's somewhere and, leaning into it when we need it. And I think another thing too for therapists, I know there's a lot of us therapists who work with kids or work with adults who have had abuse or kids who have recently experienced, sexual abuse. And to to I can only imagine to read something that's so first person, of what someone has experienced and what they're going through to help us understand on the other side too of how can we help and how can we be one of the ports? How can we help be
Hmm.
a port for somebody?
Yeah. And that was, and I think mom was so grateful to her, her therapist, and
Mm-hmm.
that helped her. And, she was, she really, and one of the things that she talked about in the book actually
Mm-hmm.
is that connection, um, because the first she had seen other therapists before, and she saw psychiatrists, but they're therapists too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but she talked about how, um, she didn't connect with them, and she really didn't get the help that she needed
Yeah.
with them, because that that therapeutic bond did not form, and
Mm-hmm.
she did not, like, and in the beginning of the book she talks about how there's a psychiatrist that she sees in the beginning of the book,
Mm-hmm.
and she's terrified of him.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I want to tell him, but I'm scared. I don't know how to tell him because I'm scared. And
Mm-hmm.
she was like, um, and she couldn't figure out why she was so scared of him. And I think she talks about in later in the book why she was so scared of him. Um,
Yeah.
but it's really, so that connection that you get as a therapist, when you get a that connection is so important.
Oh,
But mom, she really talked about, and she talked with me a great deal about it, about how she just, she early on, um, when she had seen a therapist or a psychiatrist or whatever, and she
mm-hmm.
just, she said, I went to see him, but I didn't tell him anything. I used to lie to him all the time because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want him to know anything about me. And I was so afraid. Um, and I was like, and I used to tell her, that won't get you anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if you don't like them, you can't continue to see them,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not that you have to like them you have to like them a little bit as a person, but you have to
Yeah.
have you have to have some sort of trust with them as a therapist, um, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
in order for that relationship to work. So
Yeah.
she she does talk about it in the book, and it is very interesting, from her
Yes.
perspective on um, how she perceived therapy and treatment, um, and she always said about being in the hospital that she always said it was so safe. She said, she would say sometimes, I just want to go back to the hospital. And I was like, you can go. And she was like, I'm not. I just loved it. If she said it was just so safe there. Um, and she said, I really don't want to go back. But she said, I felt so safe there. And I thought I've had other clients say the same thing, and that it was safe there, but
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
It
So,
is the world is scary in when we're out here, and there's, especially I would imagine if you've experienced any type of trauma, everything's scary. Nothing's to be trusted, and I got to be on, fight or flight, fun, all of them all the time. And, but when you're in somewhere like that, a lot of that's removed. That's got to feel really safe.
yeah, exactly. And I think she did have that. She was definitely a fight person. There was no flight in her.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
she was
Fiery.
yes, she was all, and it was funny because she came across as all fight.
Mhm.
But she was really, it was all fear.
Mhm.
She presented as this, um, but it was not what she, you know, it was a presentation
Mhm.
to keep everything away.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Coming out of the fear. The fear is what drove it.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's been so amazing to hear about not only just the, how powerful animal assisted, equine assisted therapy is, but the, the story of your mom, just hearing this short bit of how powerful this was for your mom and the hope that it gave her, and that it's in a book that others can read. It's beautiful that we can take part in that. So I just want to thank you for putting that together and the vulnerability, and that's just so awesome for so many other people to be able to dig into that.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
just thank you so much for letting me babble on, and
Oh,
um, you
no,
know,
this was so wonderful. For our listeners too, can you tell us the title of the book? I'll have links in the show notes and everything too, so we can go right to it and stuff. But what is the name of the book?
it's Recollections: A Journey in Abuse and Courage and Abuse. So
Oh, I
sorry.
love it. Oh, yes,
Yes,
yes. We'll put that in there so anyone who's listening, they can just go click on that in the show notes and head right over to it. Sounds
yes.
amazing.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it is, it's definitely a good, a book, on, it's a book of hope, I think.
Yeah.
And again, not exactly a light read, but
Hmm.
definitely, I hope a book for people to have some hope and get something out
Yes.
of. So
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. An important read, I think, for a lot of people who know someone, who work with kids, who, I think at some point, even if, anybody should read a book like this to just know and grow our empathy and our understanding of what happens, and how that hope can look too.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But
Awesome.
well, thank you.
Wonderful.
Well,
Thank you so much. This was so
thank you.
wonderful to hear. Yes, and just so for being so vulnerable too. I appreciate it so much, sharing this and, coming on, and it's awesome. I'm excited to put it out there for everyone to hear.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it and appreciate your time. And thanks to all your listeners.
All right. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Definitely check out Courtney's book, Courtney and Carolyn's book, Recollections: A Journey of Courage and Abuse. The link to that is in the show notes. It looks like an amazing book. It is on my Amazon list, and I can't wait to get it and dive into it. For anyone who is interested as well, you can always hop on our newsletter so you can get free downloads, creative ideas, exclusive access to some of our materials, updates, and a bunch of news we always share in those, and they usually go out every other week. The link to that is also in our show notes. For next week, we are celebrating our 100th episode, which feels very surreal that we are at 100 episodes, but I put out a poll on Instagram, and so if you followed us on Instagram and voted, thank you for your vote. And the votes came out to doing a Q&A with me, and the person who will be interviewing me is actually my husband, Mike. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So feel free to email me a question if you're curious, you want me to answer anything therapy related, personal related, whatever it is. I am here to answer them, and kind of excited to see what questions there are going to be. So feel free, Kate at creativetherapyumbrella.com. You can email me those. You can email me anytime. And then after that, when I put the poll up online, one of the options was kind of like recap episodes or highlight episodes from, all the many episodes that we've had. And that got a lot of votes as well. So what I've decided to do is after our 100th episode, we are going to have a series of 6 special episodes that highlight music, play, art, dance, drama, and then some other topics as well. There's going to be 6 episodes in that series, and that will be highlights from all of our past episodes wrapped up into shorter episodes, so you can kind of take that content in. If you haven't gone back and listened to all the episodes, this will be a great way to recap. If you've already listened, it's a great refresher too. So I'm hoping that those will be really enjoyable for everyone to dig into. All right. Well, I want to thank you again for being a listener, for supporting us over here at Creative Therapy Umbrella. If you have a minute and you can rate, review, or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, that is so helpful for us on our end. Podcasting takes a lot of time and energy, and something so small as giving us a rating or review really helps us out majorly. So we want to continue to do what we do over here. So if you have a minute and you're a listener and you're liking what we do, I encourage you to take that minute and support us in subscribing, liking, telling a friend, writing a review, whatever you can do. Thank you again for being a listener. Always feel free to write in, and of course, be creative.